All right. Welcome everyone to our pre-proposal information session for the Youth Development Program Services RFP with Best Starts for Kids. Our agenda for today is starting with the background on the RFP. We'll go through some Zoom grants basics for applicants, and then we'll have time for questions and answers at the end of our presentation. We'll do quick introductions for the RFP team on King County side. I am Tiffany No, the RFP lead, and my pronouns are she, her. And I'll pass it off to Dr. Shukri.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Shukri Olo. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm the program lead. I'll pass it on to David Gistarb.
Good afternoon, everybody. David Gistarb, BSK Youth Development Program Manager. Nice to meet everybody, and I'll kick it to Sarah J.
Thank you, David. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah J. I use she, her pronouns. I'm on the Best Starts for Kids data and evaluation team, and I'm stepping in for Leah Grodinsky, who's off today, but who is the evaluator for this body of work.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Cherie, and I am with the Joseph Project.
Thank you. So our next slide, we will be going over logistics for today. If you are joining us on Zoom on your computer, you can feel free to add questions in the chat box. We'll be tracking those questions and getting to them at the end of our presentation. And if you are joining us by phone, we'll open up the phone line for questions at the end as well. We'll just direct you to unmute and ask your question. And just as a reminder, we will be issuing a questions and answers amendment to the RFP, and that will be uploaded to Zoom Grants and have our official response to each of the questions. So watch out for that. And next, Shukri will start about the vision for this program. Shukri?
Awesome. Thanks, Tiffany. Welcome again, everybody. So I want to start with this slide, which I think is a good overview about what we're trying to do with Best Starts for Kids. This is actually a picture of one of my colleagues' daughter, Victoria Lynn's daughter. I think this was a picture of her in kindergarten, and now she's probably in second grade. I don't know. These kids are aging too fast. They need to slow down. But our vision for Best Starts for Kids is that babies are born healthy and given a foundation for a happy, healthy life. We believe that young people need opportunities, equitable opportunities to be happy, safe, and healthy and thriving, and that communities offer spaces that are safe, welcoming environments for their kids. And so that's Best Starts for Kids vision: happy, healthy, safe, and thriving communities. Next slide. I want to give you quick information about this RFP. Youth development encompasses programs that provide multiple opportunities for young people. There are multiple sort of 4 buckets of sub-strategies within this strategy. The first is mentorship or mentoring, organizations that are providing mentoring opportunities for youth. The second is youth leadership and engagement opportunities. The third is activities that promote positive identity development. And yesterday when we did the info session, folks asked about what kind of identity development. And this could look like gender identity, racial identity, religious identity, multiple forms of identity development would work in this strategy. And then healthy and safe relationships, including resources for mental health, domestic intimate partner violence prevention, and peer-to-peer support. And so the mental health, domestic intimate partner violence prevention was just added in addition to the healthy and safe relationships because a number of our grantees in 1.0 addressed this sort of uptick in youth mental health that we're seeing in light of COVID, but also that of multiple pandemics, that of racial reckoning, but also COVID's impact on our young people. And so those are the 4 buckets of work that we funded organizations in 1.0, and we hope to be able to fund organizations in BSK 2.0. Next slide. This is a slide from our performance measurement evaluation team. This is a graphic on promotive and protective factors. What we're hoping to do in this strategy is to increase the promotive and protective factors, including parental resilience, social connections, knowledge of parenting and child development, concrete support in times of need, and young people's social emotional or parents' social emotional competence of their children. We have dynamic outcomes kind of in the center of this work to be able to get to healthy development and well-being for children and families. We believe that we need optimal child development as an outcome, a strong and thriving families, supportive communities, and social networks, and the reduction of the likelihood of child abuse and neglect. On the right are some of the risk factors that we're hoping to reduce: psychological stressors, unhealthy birth outcomes, social isolation, multi-generational adverse childhood experiences, and unsafe, unstable, and inequitable environments. And so you can go to the next slide, which has additional information about this graphic as well. So those are the outcomes that we're trying to see in this strategy. And I would even say overall with Best Starts for Kids. But I hope that gives you a good sense of what we're hoping to do and some of the indicators that we're tracking. You can go to the next slide. Some quick information about the focus population and outcomes in this strategy. We've had lots of good questions about what are the focus population. So we're hoping to serve young people in elementary, middle school, high school, and or youth ages 18 to 24. And again, the outcomes are to increase the protective factors for youth ages 5 to 24. All right. This is a cute picture of some young folks at one of the Best Starts for Kids events. I wanted to give you just a quick look at the work that we did together in BSK 1.0. Youth development strategy was the first to go out back in 2017 when many of us started with the initiative. It was the first to go out, and I think because it was the first to go out, we had over 177 applications come in, which is a lot of applications, and I don't think we've had that many applications in other strategies. And there was a review panel, a team of both internal staff and community members that were able to help select the number of applications that we fund, and we'll tell you more about the selection process and the rating criteria later on. And out of that process, we were able to fund 32 organizations initially. And they are organizations that are doing work across the county. And so just some examples include Dove Project out in Vashon Island, the Institute for Community Leadership based in Kent, Washington, Rainier Beach Action Coalition in Southeast Seattle, Young Women Empowered, the Youth Eastside Services out in Eastside and in Bellevue. And so a number of organizations that are supporting young people in a variety of ways in the 4 buckets that I mentioned. And with 1.0, you know, we had 32 organizations and then eventually 31 organizations that were able to support a little over 5,000 young people countywide. And we were able to provide contract extensions to those organizations for the next 6 months so that there's continuity of funding. And we are now in the RFP process to be able to award new organizations. And 1.0, especially at the height of the pandemic, we focused a lot on youth mental health. We had a number of organizations sort of address that as a pattern that they were seeing in the young people that they were supporting. And so we brought resources to our grantees in the learning circles, which are kind of mandated meetings for organizations that are funded in this strategy. And so we had NAMI South King County bring resources to our awardees around what are the signs, what should adults be looking for, how can they support a young person who might be experiencing a mental health challenge. We had You Girl Girl, an organization that's focused on supporting Black girls and connecting them to counselors. And so we were able to focus for at least a good year on youth mental health. And then because of the work that we were doing in our learning circle and in other spaces, the county created a work group that was tasked with creating a more robust resource toolkit for organizations that are needing support around youth mental health. And so we, in 2.0 of Best Starts for Kids, in this strategy, we hope to be able to support and fund organizations that are supporting and working with young people around youth mental health. We also noticed a gap in the strategy, which is, next slide, serving middle school youth. And so moving forward, we want to fund youth development programs, proposals that hope to increase the number of protective factors for youth ages 5 to 24 by addressing one or more of the following strategies. So in mentorship and youth leadership and engagement, in positive identity development, and in healthy and safe relationships. And so with a particular interest around youth mental health and the gap age range that I talked about being middle school youth. So that's what we're looking for. This is one of the more broad strategies, meaning that we don't have a particular focus group. As you may have seen, because all of the 5 to 24 strategies are going out to RFP process right now. Like, for example, SSPP, Stopping the School to Prison Pipeline, has a particular focus on Black youth, Black children, Black and Brown children, and then similar demographic group for Liberated Village. Youth development does not have a demographic target. We hope to serve young people in all the ways in the 4 buckets countywide. So sometimes, that could be a strength of the strategy, and other times I know for some people it's hard to not see that particular focus area or focus demographic. So we'll go to the next slide. All right, Sarah J, take it away.
Thank you, Shakri. I'm going to talk a little bit about 2 things: using data in your application, and then what you can expect if you are awarded funding. Our data team is guided by these 3 principles that you see here: partnership, collaboration, and accessibility. And we hope that you'll see these reflected in our work together. Next slide. So you all right now are here at this info session because you must be thinking about submitting a proposal for this youth development funding opportunity. And when you think about incorporating data in your proposal, we recommend you start by identifying what's the story that you want to tell to help reviewers understand your organization, your program, or your community. If you read the RFP carefully, you will see the criteria, and I know Shakri and David are going to talk a little bit more about that as well. And that will tell you what reviewers are looking for and how proposals will be rated. So you might see criteria related to understanding equity or disparity issues, filling service gaps, and meeting community needs. These are all places where it's possible that incorporating some data might be helpful. So you can use data where it helps you tell your story and make a strong case for funding. But you don't need to spend lots of time digging through the statistics. You can use data and numbers from your work with participants and your own data as well. And again, as you'll see again and hear more about today, we have technical assistance providers that are able to help you with your proposal. And if this is an area that you're finding challenging, it's absolutely one of the many ways that technical assistance providers can help out. Next slide. So these are a few resources for data about King County that we have put together here in Best Arts for Kids and the Health Department. They're a good starting place. You can find information about lots of issues relevant to children and families in King County, as well as overall information about the population and communities that you serve from these data sources. However, we definitely don't have all the data you might be looking for. You might find it from state or national data, or again, some of the most powerful data could be your own. If you have data that shares about your program successes or the community that you're working with. So don't forget your own resources when you think about having data in your application. You're not required to use any of these sources. We just want to share them so everybody can have an opportunity to be equally aware of what's out there. Next slide. All right, so now switching gears a little bit, thinking about what will be required if you are funded for youth development. All Best Arts for Kids grantees will participate in performance measurement and reporting activities. This includes submitting both quantitative or numbers and qualitative or narrative data that will help us understand your program's impact, as well as the impact that we're having more broadly across Best Arts for Kids as a whole. Something that is relatively new as a universal requirement for Best Arts for Kids is that programs are also now required to report zip codes for all participants, so we know where we're reaching people and where there are gaps. This is something new that was added by the King County Council when Best Arts for Kids was renewed. However, at this stage of the game, as you think about your proposal, proposals are not required to include any kind of evaluation plan. Department of Community and Human Services will work with organizations that are funded to create some measures and data collection plans. And so what we're looking for in the proposal stage is to see that applicants understand that evaluation will be part of our work together and they're willing to partner with us on it. And then finally, we do have several tools available to help measure program impact. These include the Youth Development Measurement Tool, which was created by a partnership including Best Arts for Kids staff, young people, and other community-based service providers over the last several years, and has questions on identity development, social emotional learning, and program environments suitable for youth ages 11 to 24. Next slide. So again, if you're funded and you are submitting data to us in general, this will be shared on a quarterly basis or every 3 months, and it will include demographic information about who you're serving, numbers about the services that you're providing, and finally, information about the outcomes that participants achieve. So some examples, these aren't necessarily what you would have to report depending on your program, but just to give an idea of the kinds of measures that youth development partners have reported in the past: number of youth enrolled in services, percent of youth that are regularly engaged, percent of youth gaining knowledge or skills, or percent of youth feeling hopeful or optimistic about the future. And then, as I mentioned, there's also qualitative or narrative reporting. And this will be something that will ask you to fill out a brief survey once a year. And it has less than half a dozen questions that just ask for an overview of what are some of the changes you've made, successes that you've achieved, and challenges that you've experienced. I will be delighted to hear any questions that you have when we get to the end of our presentation. And now we are back to Shakri and David.
All right. A quick summary: the funding that's available in this strategy is about $12 million. The proposals are due on Zoom Grants on May 16th by 2 p.m. Contract is for up to a 3-year contract, and the funding request limit is up to $375,000. So 3-year contract, funding request limit is up to $375,000. Back to you, Tiffany.
Here we have our tentative timeline for this RFP. It was released on April 4th, and Today is our second information session. We had one yesterday. And we shared the same information, and we'll upload the recording to Zoom Grants for anyone who was unable to attend. The cutoff for questions submitted via Zoom Grants is April 19th. So make sure that you go in and submit any other questions you may have through Zoom Grants by that date. The deadline to request technical assistance from our consultants is May 2nd. And then, like Shukri mentioned, proposals are due at 2 p.m. on May 16th. We will be reviewing proposals and scoring them May 18th through June 1st. And then if applicable, we'll have interviews with proposers in June as well. And we're aiming to send notice of selection and non-selection in June, with the ultimate goal of having a contract in place with the awardees in July. So here's a little bit about how proposers will be selected. First step is to have an administrative review, and that entails reviewing proposals to make sure that they meet the minimum qualifications that were stated in the RFP. And we make sure that proposals are complete and responsive, and that means that everything that we've requested has been provided and submitted in a timely manner. Next will be the review panel, and we will have evaluators reviewing the proposals, and the highest scoring proposals will be recommended for a contract. If we're unable to select awardees based on the proposal only, we will invite people in for interviews, and those will be scheduled in June tentatively if needed. And finally, proposers must be approved by DCHS leadership. And back to Shukri to talk about the evaluation criteria.
I saw a question in the chat. We'll be able to get to the questions at the end. So this is our RFP rating criteria. As you might have seen on the Zoom Grants application, we are looking at kind of 4 areas, criteria description areas. The first is around equity and need. We want you to be able to talk about the population or the community that you're hoping to serve, some of the strengths of that community, some of the challenges that that community is impacted by. We have that question, and then there are 5 points possible for that question. We have a question around what is your proposed project goals? What are you hoping to do? That question has a 5 points possibility. We have a question around expertise or experience. We know that some organizations that are kind of brand new to the nonprofit landscape will also be applying. And so we have a question around intentions, like what are your intentions in serving this demographic group? 5 points possible for that. We have a question around youth community involvement. Are young people involved in your proposal? What did that look like in this application? We have a 5 points for that. And then there's a question about your budget. We also attach a budget template. That question is not rated, but it helps us understand kind of what your goals are and how you're hoping to be able to spend the money. Total possible points of 20.
Thank you. Next, how to apply. As we've mentioned throughout the presentation, you will submit your responses through Zoom Grants, and the address is right there on the slide, and I'll put it in the chat real quick in case people would like to follow along. And in Zoom Grants, you'll make sure that you respond to all questions in each tab. And then for this RFP, we have attachment B, a budget template, and that will be completed in an Excel file and then uploaded under the budget tab in Zoom Grants. If you have any questions about the RFP content, you can feel free to reach out to me through email at tingo@kingcounty.gov. And just to repeat what we've said before, proposals must be received via Zoom Grants no later than May 16th by 2 p.m. Proposers are responsible for regularly checking Zoom Grants for any updates, clarifications, or amendments to the RFP. So for example, once we're done with the question cutoff line, we will issue an amendment to post the questions and answers so everyone has the written official response accessible on Zoom Grants. And if you experience any technical issues with Zoom Grants, please submit a ticket directly to them. They're responsive and able to help out with any technical difficulties. Like I mentioned before, you can reach out to me if you need assistance with the content of the RFP. And make sure that you allow sufficient time to submit your proposal in a timely manner and make sure that all technical difficulties with Zoom Grants are resolved before our May 16th deadline. Next up, I'll just take you through a Zoom Grants demonstration so you can see what it looks like and all the steps that need to be taken when you're submitting your application. So once you click on that link, you'll be taken to this page here, the BSK Youth Development Program Services RFP. At the top right-hand side, if you have an existing Zoom Grants account, you can just log in with your email and password. If you need to set up a Zoom Grants account, you just click on this new Zoom Grants account button, and then that takes you here where you have this box to put in your email address, password, first and last name, and then you'll have your new account activated. Oops. Going back to the program page. This first description section is a summary of what's in the RFP packet. So you have the overview, the period of performance, a recap of the timeline. And then just a quick reminder here that communication about this RFP should be directed to me as the RFP lead. The next section are the minimum qualifications. So you'll want to review this to make sure that your organization meets all these minimum qualifications, and then you'd be considered eligible for the opportunity. The library is an important section that you'll want to pay attention to. This is where the RFP is uploaded, as well as the budget template. And I'll just open the RFP so you can see what it looks like. It's a PDF file and it has all of the information you need regarding the RFP and what we're looking for in your proposal. These three tabs here are your actual proposal application. So it starts with the summary tab, and this is basic information like your name and contact. And we have the zip code question here, and this is where we collect the data about where your services are provided. If you provide services for all of King County, you can just click this all checkbox, or you can individually select the zip codes where your services are provided. And then next up is the project narrative questions tab, and this is the bulk of your application. You'll scroll through and make sure that you are reading and responding to each of the questions in the text box. So just scrolling through, you can see what the questions and the text boxes look like. When you type in your response and click out of the text box, Zoom Grants will automatically save, so you don't have to complete your application in one sitting. You can start it and then come back to it later, as long as you're meeting our May 16th deadline. And then next tab is the budget. And this is where you will upload your completed budget template. You can also download it here just for your convenience. It's the same attachment as what you'll find in the library. And you'll just click this upload button here to attach the spreadsheet and then upload it to complete your application. Once your responses are done and complete, Zoom Grants will let you know if anything that is required was missing. And then if it is missing, you can go back and add that information for us and then submit it when you are done. Going back to the top, I just wanted to show you this help link at the top. You can click on this And Zoom Grants has some videos and different guidance documents like a slideshow and a tip sheet that you can look at. You can also click this contact admin button, and that will send an email to me if you have a question about the RFP content. And then, like I mentioned before, if you have technical issues with Zoom Grants, you can click on this Ask Zoom Grants button, and that will open up an email that goes directly to Zoom Grants to open up a help ticket. So with that, we'll go back to Shukri to talk a little bit more about the technical assistance consultants.
Great. Thanks, Tiffany. So this tab, free technical assistance, is also included in the RFP on Zoom Grants, but it is available to support applicants and eliminate barriers that prevent you all from seeking funding. There's a little note on the bottom that says TA is not grant writing. And so I want to be clear that that's not what they're able to do, but technical assistants are able to provide and assist in determining appropriate fit between your program and the RFP. They are able to provide guidance on how to best answer questions and where to find supportive data. And then finally, they can review your application, they can edit, and they can review your budget. They cannot write your grants. So back to you, Tiffany.
Thank you. Again, you can reach out to me via email if you have any questions. I can put my email in the chat after this slide. And you can contact the technical assistance providers directly for support, and make sure that you look at the glossary of terms for a list of relevant definitions. And the RFP includes a checklist, and that checklist can help you make sure that your proposal is complete before you submit it to us via Zoom Grants. So now we are at our questions portion of the day, and we can start with the chat questions, and then we'll open it up for phone questions after we get through a few of the chats.
Okay, I'll start with Sean's question. Will there be monitoring visits with this grant? Absolutely. The team does contract monitoring where we look at your program, and then fiscal also comes out and does fiscal monitoring. So that is part of having funding from the county. Heidi, you're asking, is the funding for one specific project or can it be multiple projects under the same strategy? This strategy, we are funding one specific project in one sub-strategy. I've not seen multiple programs funded in multiple strategies within this, or within multiple sub-strategies within this one strategy. That makes sense. We're funding one specific project under the same strategy. Honey's question, if young people turn 25, will they no longer be covered by the grant? I can imagine maybe one or two young people within your program potentially aging out of the program, right? But ideally you have a good spread of age groups. And so if you're, say, for example, have a project that's serving young people between the ages of 18 to 25, then you might recruit for that balance so that you don't have many young people aging out. I hope that answers your question. What does the final day to submit questions mean? Due date April 19th. Tiffany, you want to take that?
Yeah. So the cutoff date for questions is the ideal date for you to send in your questions through Zoom Grants. So you can click on those buttons that I showed during the demo, and we just want to set a due date so we can issue our responses in a timely manner. So if you get your questions in by April 19th, we can review them, respond to them, and then upload our responses to Zoom Grants so everyone has our answers with plenty of time to finish their applications.
And again, my responses or our responses to these questions will be up on the Zoom Grants, and so you don't have to take notes. We'll provide the questions and answers on an FAQ. Next question, can a proposed project period be any length up to 3 years? Are projects that last a full 3 years prioritized? Projects have to be for a period of 3 years. It's a 3-year contract, so we cannot fund projects that are providing services for less than that time frame. So it's a 3-year contract. Your program has to last for that 3 years. And I don't think we prioritize. It's sort of an expectation that your program will last for 3 years, given that the funding is a 3-year contract. Hope that responds to your question. To clarify, is this grant meant to support general operating costs for an organization, or it's an individual program? The grant is not meant to support your overall operating costs for an organization. We are funding a program, an individual program that your organization is providing to support young people in the 4 different buckets of work that happens in the strategy. I hope that responds to your question. Is there a PDF available for the form? Which form?
I can answer this one. I think they're
Okay.
referring to the narrative questions.
Oh, okay.
So there is a PDF available. It's one of the pages in the RFP document. So we have the narrative questions in there for reference, but you should put your responses in Zoom grants and submit them that way. Do previous grantees apply the same way, or do they submit through a different process? Previous grantees should apply in the same way through Zoom grants.
Yeah, this is an open RFP process. And so any organization that was awarded in 1.0 has to go through the same process that all of you who may not have been awarded through Best Starts are going through. So no preference to organizations who've been funded in the past or a priority in funding them again. The PDF RFP contains different unsecured questions, age, COVID vaccination, then the Zoom grants version, zip code, which questions need to be answered.
I can answer this one too. So Zoom grants needs to be updated with the COVID vaccination question. I think the age question is already on there, but you will need to answer the questions that are on Zoom grants.
Ruth, can services be delivered via Zoom? Best Starts for Kids needs a strategy or a statement around expectations for grantees. I think majority of our organizations are doing both in-person and virtual programming. As we are at the endemic stage of this pandemic, I think that might shift to fully in-person programming. And so be thinking about what that program model looks like if you are providing either virtual option or in person. I think we have a preference for a hybrid model and or fully in-person model by the time that organizations get funding. So if the RFP needs to focus on one program, can an org apply for multiple projects in this RFP? And if they are competitive, can an org have several awards? That's a good question. David, I don't know if you have a response to this, but I want to think through this offline and give you an accurate answer. I don't think there's a limit to how many projects an organization can apply for. I haven't seen that. But I want to think through this question some more. Good question, Helen.
Also added in the chat from Helene or Helen, we literally have programs that are in the 4 buckets, just FYI, should be.
Yeah, so theoretically, I mean, you could apply for Although it seems like a lot of work on your end, but I mean, you could apply for a mentoring program in the mentoring bucket, a healthy relationship program in the healthy relationship bucket, etc.
I also
Okay.
think, Shukri, I just wanted to add, I also think too, if you're going to try to fund multiple programs through one organization, you're just going to have to break down. That's not a lot of money for 375,000 for 3 years to fund that many programs. So you would have to be really clear on the project and the scope of work and the hiring and the budget template. So yeah, I think we'll respond to that in the amendment, but I would just be careful of watering down 375,000, which seems like it's a lot of money, but for 3 years, and if you're trying to do too much, I would just be careful.
Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, you know, the review committee will be scoring the applications, and if they decide that 2 out of your 4 proposals are solid, then there's a decision team that gets to look at different factors that the review panel might not be looking at, right? Especially around geographic diversity of the awardees in this contract, you know, the demographic that we're serving. And so there might be conversations that happen with a review panel, but then that might shift what happens with the decision team. And so just because you apply doesn't mean obviously that you'll be awarded for multiple, even if the multiple are really solid programming, right? Because there are considerations that leadership and other teams are also looking at. For round 1, I'm wondering if in round 1, every organization that applied got to, no, good question, Beth. Every organization that applied did not get the 375 full amount. Each organization knows their budget, right? And their expenses. And so some organizations were asking for less than the limit amount. Some organizations were asking for the max. And then there's contract negotiation once organizations are awarded. And, you know, that can change and shift what amount an organization gets. And so, yeah, it really just differs on each organization. Are you hoping to fund a certain percentage or number of projects per strategy? We're hoping for a balance of projects funded in each strategy. And so last in 1.0, you know, we didn't really have a really solid balance of like healthy relationships versus cultivating leadership versus mentorship versus positive identity. And so we're looking for a better balance this time around. I don't think there's a percentage amount that we've prioritized. Do you prioritize programs in a certain stage of readiness? For example, design, build something, new pilot, broad implementation, or refining established program? If this were the case, then I think we would be funding organizations that we've already funded. And so, because then, you know, if they've been doing the work for 4 years in the strategy, then they would have broad implementation or a refined established program, or, you know, they were able to build something that also now works, that has data points that could be measured, that, you know, the impact is clear. And so, no, there isn't a priority. We encourage anybody who wants to support young people in any of the 4 buckets to apply. Thanks for the question. I have 12th grade students who are graduating from high school and are in our program, and they're writing reflection essays on their experience in the BSK funded program for the last 3 to 4 years. Can I submit those under stories, or is it just included narrative reporting? I think you could submit those under additional materials in Zoom grants, Samantha. I'd be happy to read them as well. Okay, awesome. That's a response to your question, Helen. Bailey, it feels like this question of program strategies comes down to the difference between how an org defines a program. For instance, if an org serves an unduplicated total of 200 plus youth, and each of those youth take part in activities that are distinct but aligned, do we submit an application for the entire body of work as a program? Yeah. Can you say more? Can I invite you to go off mute?
Sure. Yeah. I just keep hearing some questions around like difference between projects and strategies. And I'm wondering like if, for instance, an organization, like I said, serves like 200 youth and the programs that they do, like many of the youth participate in 2 out of 3 different sets of activities, or maybe some students participate in all 3. To me, like depending on the size, that could be effectively a program. But I'm getting confused with how we're talking about the difference between project and program. Like my instinct would be to submit all 3 of those activities and the unduplicated youth as an entire program. But I guess I'm curious if that's how y'all are understanding or recommending it as well.
Yeah, I don't think we're stating a difference between program and project. And so I don't see why you wouldn't be able to apply with the current program that you have established. Okay. Yes, the recording will be available to participants once we are done. We're going to put both recordings on Zoom grants, and then we'll put out an amendment with an FAQ that will have all the questions from yesterday, all the questions from today, and then we'll respond to it, and you'll have access to those questions as well.
There's
Isn't that
another
Mrs. Bennett?
question.
Bennett, did you want
Who's
to?
calling, please? Who's
There's a question in the chat. The RFP PDF, I read that we need to choose 2 age groups. Is it possible to choose 3 or more?
We're going to be amending that on Zoom grants. So it will be possible to choose 3 or more in the coming days.
And do we have any phone questions? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question at this time.
All right, well, we are grateful for your presence today. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to the amazing Tiffany, who is collecting all of them. And best of luck in the application process. Be well.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you.